you. Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone who's joining us. I am Suzanne Rajkumar, and I am from Trinidad and Tobago, but I am currently in Honduras. My presentation today is on how the cultural context of an English-speaking Caribbean teacher inspired the use of game-based learning in the EFL classroom. I have my timer, so I'm going to try and see if I can stick to our 10 minutes. Just a brief background to who I am. My teaching experience started in Trinidad and Tobago. I taught in high school or junior high for a number of years before arriving in Honduras in 2000. So even though I taught some adults in Trinidad in some private institutions, most of my experience was with high school. So from teaching adolescents, arriving into Honduras, I was immersed into teaching adults in an ESL context. And then because of that process and the number of hours, I was led to creating content for lack of content. And now here I am in 2020 into peer sharing and where it takes us with lessons learned. So what were my cultural challenges? I went from a 24-hour cable and internet service in Trinidad and Tobago to 2000 entering into limited internet service and no cable. In terms of where we lived, there was nada, nothing at all. And I came from a culture that promoted creativity. Creativity is something that's a constant for us. Whereas creativity, when I mention creative ideas or doing projects, or my students saw it as a leisure. They didn't want to invest time into it because, there's a strong precedent to earn, which brings us to the attitude of poverty. Arriving into Honduras, it redefined my concept of poverty because in Trinidad, for us, it's just a situation where you can change your circumstances through education. Education, it's a place to become empower yourself. Whereas in Trinidad, what I encountered with a lot of I'm sorry, in Honduras, what I encountered with a lot of my students, you saw that they felt very downtrodden, that the extreme situations made them feel that they were incapable of overcoming their circumstances. They needed to work themselves to the bone just to be able to live comfortably. So it was a very different attitude. So studying, finding time to study, if you weren't in a job that provided a salary, certain aspects of learning were considered like leisure. The diversity of indoor and outdoor games in the Caribbean is something that was very wide, very, very wide. We have beaches, we have mountains, we have hiking trails, we have tournaments, card games, interaction. There's so much socializing in our Caribbean context. And in Honduras, the history of violence in the country create, I'm sorry, the 95% of the game culture is football. So that footballing culture, um, pretty much if you're a girl and you are not into football, you would be excluded from the majority of that gaming elements and all that goes, the hype and the aggression and all the things and the joy and entertainment, but it's very different. The different skills that a variety of games can develop. And island life cultivates trust. We are a more trusting society in comparison to mainland, where the history of violence really and truly breeded a lot of mistrust. People were very uncomfortable to be vulnerable in particular situations. So, what were the urgent adult ESL needs that I discovered? Everyone walked into a classroom and they said, "Teacher, I want to speak English well. I want to read and write like a native speaker, and I want to listen. I want to be able to understand." So it's like, okay, well, let's put in the work. What's the work? But they didn't want to do role playing because role playing means that you would sometimes look silly. They didn't want to look silly before their peers. They didn't have enough time to study. Their work schedules were really, really, really tough. And we're talking about decision makers because I've taught mostly middle and upper level executives. So these are people, they're decision makers in their companies. They're responsible for negotiating, for participating in deals, for representing their brand internationally. So there's a lot of work tied into how they are perceived externally and their personal sense of failure. They did not want to fail, they did not want to feel inferior by using a language that was not their own. So, how did my strategy to overcome these elements was to turn to gaming. Why? Why did I turn to games? Um, in our culture, in our Caribbean context, and this is where our culture comes in. I come from the land of carnival and calypso. And it's just a very natural part. Our previous presenter, Stephen, started off with extempo. Extempo calypso, you don't have to be a university graduate to create a calypso song. It is something that is cultivated in the entire population, little kids, older kids, elderly, young. If you have the ability to think of an idea that you can put out in social commentary, therefore you can have a calypso that's out. You add some beats, and if it's popular and it hits with the crowd, you have something that's out there. It reflects people's opinions. In the Caribbean, our culture teaches us, it empowers our opinion making. Our opinion making is seen in our carnival. Our opinion making is seen in the reflection and the commentaries that we made, and we're not afraid to express those opinions. That was something that I found was missing in the skill set of my students. So, something as simple as carnival, anyone having an idea could move from conceptualization to engineering and design to performance for just 2 days out of the year. Yet this process is a process that is lived and breathed by almost everyone in the country over and over and over. Meeting adult ESL needs, this is where I could only think of the nostalgia that I had. I needed to change their mindset. And to do that, to change their thinking, I decided I needed to distract them or entertain them and play games, create new learning experiences for them in order to alleviate their stress and frustration. So, what's the difference between gaming, gamification, or gameful thinking and game based learning? Gaming traditionally you would tend to associate with electronic and video games, but game based learning is similar to what Stephen was mentioning about preparing offline to get online. It is where we want to apply game based principles to learning context in the classroom, which means involving them, getting them to play, doing grammar. This, they're doing verb conjugation, yet it would be different challenges for them. And if you'd notice in the pictures, everyone is looking at what's in front of them. They're thinking, I don't even have to prod them. They're sorting it out, and I have my timer. What do teachers need to do in a teacher game-based learning tactics? No one set clear objectives. Keep it simple. It's a game. Make it fun. If you see that the plan is not working and it's not fun, stop. Engage your students. Teamwork is always a must. I found in a mistrusting society, making them work as a team, giving them a grade that was common to everyone, made the strong help the weak, and help the weak ask for help. And they found ways to communicate and socialize differently. Games must have rules. Rules, I found, as it pertains to developing our implicit memory, helps us automate the process. If they did something over and over, it created a pattern. And once that pattern was created, then they found, wow, I'm switching between the languages, and they didn't even realize in what moment that natural switch was flipped. Always bring a timer. That is my secret weapon. Rob has his timer of 10 minutes. I have my timer here. A timer keeps our games exciting. Doesn't make a difference. I saw adults go crazy because the timer is there. It changes our mindset and gives students game rules. The rules that we give them empower them. We take them out of their mundane world and we give them something different. They get into role play without thinking it's role playing. Think of creating new learning experiences. This is what I would leave with teachers. Think of creating new learning experiences rather than just teaching a lesson. Create a narrative. Ensure that they get immediate feedback. We're in a society with the internet where everything is at our fingertips. Students want immediate feedback. Fun, fun, fun. It's not all about crazy entertainment, but it is about how do I make it challenging? Challenges are interesting. Scaffolded learning. Make sure that the challenges can increase. 1 tense, 2 tenses, mixing several of them, going together, and mastery. Stephen mentioned PBLs. These are points, badges, or leaderboards. I use deliberate practice points in my classes. As long as they do an activity, they gain a certain amount of points. They're seeing those points. They don't practice, they don't get points. So therefore, that is something that they look at. And player control. Changing their roles changes their mindset. Before you know it, they're doing different things, they're engaging in a different way, they're stepping outside of their traditional form of thinking. And before you know it, they're like, whoa, I didn't even realize. I had a student call me and tell me, teacher, he said, I didn't realize that I had changed. I said, how so? He said, a friend of mine came out, we've been in an all day tech presentation. And one colleague said, I can't handle any more English. And I realized I've been in the class for like the last 6 hours, and that used to be me. I used to have that kind of headache. I used to have that situation. So playing games taught them that they could do, there goes my timer. Playing games taught them that they could do different things. It taught them that they could, it taught them that they could think outside the box and that they could learn another language. They could assimilate it and they could produce it in the most natural way. So I want to say thank you to everyone, and I hope you have fun gamifying your classes. Thank you, Rob.